Okay, so today we're gonna talk about tax sanction or penalty. As you guys know that almost every country has their own regulations related to the tax payment or so. So firstly, we need to know what is the function of the tax and why there's some regulation that regulates their own citizens to pay the taxes regularly. So most of the country use taxes that they collect from their own citizens to run the country itself. Like you can say it as their own source of income. So if the citizens not willing to pay the tax, then it is almost impossible for a country to run their own country because they have no source of income. Like you need money to run a country, right? So by taking this in mind, they trying to make some regulations to make an order for the citizens to regularly pay the taxes to their own government or country, whatever you call it. And this is the origins of why there's things called tax sanction for mostly for the citizens. And then we're gonna talk about the types of tax sanction itself that is going to be explained by one of my groups.
Right now, I'm going to explain types of tax sanction. There are two types of tax sanction: administrative sanction and criminal sanction. Administrative sanction divided into three types of tax sanction. The first one is fine sanction, the second is interest sanction, and the last one is increase sanction. Let's see what are these three sanctions. So the first one is fine sanction. Fine sanction will be imposed on taxpayers who against their tax reporting obligation, like they are late to pay or not reporting the tax at all. The amount of fines imposed varies depending on the prevailing law and regulation. An example of a fine sanction is if you're late in submitting an value-added tax annual notification letter, or called as SPT masa PPN, then you need to pay 500,000 rupiah. Then when you are late in submitting the income tax annual notification letter, or called as SPT masa PPH, then you need to pay 1 million rupiah for a corporate and 100,000 rupiah for an individual. Next, interest sanction. Similar to fine sanction, interest sanction will also be imposed on the taxpayer who do not pay tax on due date, or in other words, late to pay the tax. The interest sanction is based on the KUP Law Article 9 Paragraph 2A and 2B. In Paragraph 2A discuss that the fine that will be imposed on the taxpayer who pays the tax after maturity, which is 2% per month, calculated from the due date until the tax payment date. Meanwhile, in Article 9, Paragraph 2B, discuss a fine of 2% per month which will be imposed on the taxpayer who just pay the tax after the due date on the SPT submission. And the last one, increased sanction. Increase in sanction will be imposed on the taxpayer who commits violations such as falsifying data, which they reduce the amount of income so that the tax imposed is less, and many other frauds. If this fraud is detected and caught, the taxpayer will be subject to sanction in the form of an increase in the amount of tax that should be paid. The range for this sanction is 50% of the reduced tax. For example, when you should pay 2,500,000 in tax, But due to falsifying data and changing details regarding the income, the amount of tax you end up paying is only 1,500,000 rupiah. If you are subject to an increase in sanction, then the 1 million rupiah that was embezzled must be paid twice as much to 2 million rupiah. So that's all the explanation about administrative sanction and the types of administrative sanction. The second type of tax sanction, criminal sanction, will be explained by Rizkawati. Thank you.
Hello, here is Ka. My friend Tessa already explained to you about administrative sanction. And here I'm gonna explain to you about tax criminal sanction. But before that, we should know what is the meaning of criminal sanction. Criminal sanction are imposed on those who commit serious crime. So they tend to harm the country's income flow intentionally. Criminal sanctions are tax witnesses given in the form of criminal penalties. And in the text itself, there are three criminal sanctions. The first is criminal fines, the second is cage, and the third is imprisonment. It depends on the action taken recorded in the tax law. Criminal fines, the first. Witnesses in the form of criminal fines are imposed on taxpayer, tax official, and the third parties who commit non-criminal offenses which are both criminal and criminal in nature. The second sanction is cage. It is criminal cage are only treated with criminal offense that can be attributed to wajib pajak, WP or taxpayer, and the third parties. And the third sanction in the tax criminal tax is prison. Prisoners are treated with non-criminal offense. The threat of prison imprisonment is not addressed to the third party. It is to the official, and taxpayer WP. Next, when we're talking about sanction that we know it is referred to the government right, we should know the resource of that sanction. And of course, in Indonesia, in what part of undang-undang it is written down. And for criminal sanctions in the field of taxation are regulated or stipulated in Undang-Undang Number 6 in 1983, as amended last with Undang-Undang Number 28 in 2017 on general provisions and procedures of taxation, and Undang-Undang Number 12 in 1985 as amended by the law Undang-Undang Number 12 in 1985 on building and land tax. Okay, next, if you heard correctly what I have mentioned in the first slide when I talking about the diverse criminal sanction in the field of taxation, you will heard that I mentioned you that criminal sanction will treat it to three subject. The first is taxpayer, the second is officials, and the last is to the third parties. And here I will explain you one by one parties. Okay, the first is sanction for a criminal act by taxpayer. Actually, you may read it on my slide. I already write it clear. So if you want to make your own understanding, you can pause this video and read it by yourself. But yeah, I will try to read it to you. Okay. The first sanction is sanction deliberately do not deliver SPT as intended in Pasal 39 KUP. Can be punished in the form of prison sentence of at least 6 months and a maximum of 6 years, as well as a fine of at least 2 times or at most 4 times on it or underpaid. The criminal was sentenced once to 2 times if he was convicted of committing another criminal act in the field of taxation before 1 year later, calculated since the completion of the prison sentence dropped. The second, sanction tried to abuse NPWP and PKK. The sanction is same like the first sanction tried to deliberate do not deliver SPT. Okay, it is clear, right? Um, the third is alpha delivering SPT or incomplete or enclosing incorrect information. The sanction it is penalties for imposed criminal penalties no later than 3 months and a maximum of 1 year, and fines of at least 1 times and at most 2 times the amount of tax not paid or underpaid. The fourth is deliberately not submitting SPOP, tax objective notification letter, or submitting with incomplete content or incorrect information as referred to article or pasal 24 of Undang-Undang PBB Building Land Tax. The sanction criminal imprisonment for a maximum of 6 months and fine of at least 2 times the amount due. And the last is deliberately not submitting SPOP of or submitting with incomplete or incorrect contents, falsifying documents, and or giving incorrect evidence. The sanction is criminal imprisonment 2 years or fine of 5 times the outstanding tax. Okay, next, the second is sanction for officials. There are two criminal acts. It is okay, I will mention one by one. Okay, the first is kealpaan do not fulfill the obligation to keep the matter as referred into Article 34 KUP Violence Act. The sanction is imprisonment less than 1 year and a maximum fine of 25 million rupiahs. And then the second is with act crime is deliberately not fulfilling the obligation to keep confidential matter as mentioned in Article 34 of the KUP Act, Crime Act. The first is Violence Act and this is the Crime Act. Okay, the sanction is imprisonment for up to 2 years or a maximum fine of 50 million rupiahs. Okay, the last parties is sanction for the third parties. With the crime acting is deliberately do not show or do not line letters or other documents and do not provide the necessary information as referred into Article 25 Ayat 1 letter D and C of Undang-Undang PBB. The sanction is imprisonment for up to year and maximum fine of 2 million rupiahs.
Our friends are clearly explaining about the types and the other things that are related to the tax sanction. Now we need to know how to avoid the tax sanction or the tax penalty itself. It is actually pretty simple to avoid the tax sanction, but the things that we need to avoid it must be done carefully. Like we need to fill the annual notification letter of the tax carefully, and then the details must be precise, and we need to avoid any kind of tax criminal activities. And the last one, we need to hand over the taxes and the reports or anything in time.